Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Good morning, Vietnam!
I have you now.
We came, we saw, we kicked its ass. Hello! My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
My calculations are correct. When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious...
You're listening to the 30-something movie podcast. One movie each week, 30 years in the making. It's the 30-something movie podcast, and it's not going to do any good if I start singing because I can't sing, but I'm in a store and I'm singing. I'm on a podcast and I'm singing. We're just going to leave that to the professionals.
Yeah. Why are you singing tonight, John?
I don't, it just felt like it.
Well, good for you.
Because my soul is filled with music. It's filled with 3 hour-and-a-half episodes of music.
Yeah, that's outstanding. That the music podcast is so far cost me almost $100 last night on iTunes.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it kind of cost me a trip to the to one of the local libraries halfway through the day. I was like,
Yeah.
Do I need lunch or do I need to go to the soundtrack section of the library and grab a couple things?
It's like shots of Jaeger when you're in college. They just keep going down so easy, and then you see the bill.
What do you mean college?
Good point. Good point.
Maybe.
So how did your week start off, John?
Maybe I'm doing that right now. I went to the library and you did Jaeger shots, and that's how we roll.
And here we all are.
And here we all are. Here you are. You are the co-hosts. You are Jeff, and you are Pat, and I am John. All right. Well, this is, as we mentioned before, this is the 30-something movie podcast. We are coming off of a 3-episode extravaganza that started with our 150th. So we are now on episode 153. So we now have nothing to look forward to for another 47 episodes, I guess.
I suppose I could come up with another topic for us to start thinking about.
We could.
Or do we?
I was just gonna say, what are we doing for the 200 thing?
The 200th? Oh, we got to think about that one.
Okay.
I would like to say that's a little ways away, but I started making the list for next year's podcasts, and I realized that it's really actually not that far.
No.
So
objects in the mirror,
Yeah.
I just want to say that I like Jeffrey's idea of doing the Magnificent or the
Great Escape.
Great Escape 55th anniversary. And
I'm up for that.
If we want to make it like an annual thing and do the 55th next year, the 56th the following year, the 57th, I'd be fine with that too.
Why don't we just create a podcast where once a year you do an episode on the Great Escape?
The Great Escape Minute.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. Maybe I need to do the Great Escape Minute podcast.
Maybe you could do that. Maybe it's just take it minute by minute and do it that way. The guys who did the one I used to listen to, because it just ended last week, was the Rocketeer Minute. Mm-hmm. Excellent podcast. I don't think they're ever going to get Joe Johnson to do any kind of director commentary for The Rocketeer, just based off how it was left with Disney when he left there. After that movie was made, and I don't know that I understand all that because he has since done a Marvel movie with Captain America, so I don't know how you can have a bad relationship with Disney and then go make another one. But that podcast, if anybody wants director commentary, just go listen to that podcast because it is hours upon hours of all this information that you wouldn't even be able to cram into a director commentary. So it was just an excellent podcast. And I found out they're going to do another one. They're going to do the Bram Stoker's Dracula Minute.
Cool.
So I'm on board for that one too. But yeah, you could do the Great Escape Minute.
Cool.
Or if you're really detailed, you could do the Great Escape 30 seconds. You do every 30 seconds of the movie.
I could do that.
That it just stretches out.
It's gonna be pretty simple. Whenever McQueen comes on stage, it's just, dude, here it is, awesome, and the awesome is just and then when McQueen comes on stage with his motorcycle, then it's like awesome all in caps and me yelling.
Well, that motorcycle scene. That motorcycle scene is going to take you 3 weeks?
Yeah.
We got a couple of other things first.
Hold on. I've got a couple of other movie music things that I got 2 things I want to bring up about movie music.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. If we got other stuff to say, let's do that first. But what do you got?
So one thing that we didn't bring up, and I don't know how we missed it, was talking about the solfege in Close Encounters. That 5-note music sequence that they use for communicating with the aliens.
Yeah.
I don't know how we didn't think to talk about that, but my goodness, what an incredible plot point to have in the movie, that the common language happens to be music.
Absolutely. Other places will parody that, or like you mentioned, the noise for the Batman transition is the ringtone on the Riddler's phone in Gotham. And I was watching something the other day where there was another little musical theme that came up in another show I was watching, and that one seems to come up in a lot of different places. It gets referenced in a lot of other movies and TV shows.
Such a prevalent part of the movie,
Mm-hmm.
And I would be willing to bet, Jeff, you're probably more familiar with the score than I am, but I mean, that riff takes a big role in the score too. Isn't that kind of one of the themes or one of the motives that he uses when he's composing it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just a very cool thing.
So I definitely wanted to mention that one. And the other thing that occurred to me, the use of a song in a movie would be Queen's "Don't Stop Me Now" from Shaun of the Dead. Great use of the song at the end of that movie.
I thought of so many other things. I mean, and we talked for hours, but I thought of so many other things afterwards. I'm like, oh, we didn't talk about this. Oh, we didn't talk about that. And there's too much good stuff.
Yeah, there just is. And I'm sure the more I think about it, the more I'm going to come up with more things yet. So I'm just going to leave it at those two things that I wanted to...
Yeah.
You wanted to get out there.
Yeah, just put those out there for consideration.
Yeah, I was, and Pat, like you messaged the other day that you went off and you bought a whole bunch of soundtracks. After listening to the podcast and after talking, and like I said, I did the same thing. Went to the library and grabbed a whole bunch of CDs. They had like a best of James Horner's music that I picked up. They had I realized I had not. I don't have the soundtrack to Interstellar. And I feel like I remember watching that movie and enjoying the music, so I picked up the soundtrack to that one too to listen to that. And one thing I did my civic duty, and I realized that Blues Brothers was in the movie soundtrack section, so I moved it to the musicals section, and I hope the librarians were okay with that.
Well, okay, but is Jeff going to be okay with that?
I don't know. I mean, I just felt like it was the time I went to the library and I had to move Howard the Duck from the children's section to the adult section because they just didn't know. So,
yeah. Well, I don't know. That I'll let you and Jeffrey discuss that move of the Blues Brothers. But definitely a good soundtrack nonetheless.
Mm-hmm. That's true. We'll leave it at that for now. We could do a whole other podcast on that. The one other thing I wanted to bring up, and I couldn't really find too many other new movie news type things, but the one other thing I wanted to bring up was something I had tweeted out from our podcast Twitter account a little while back, was they are re-releasing Superman the movie with additional scenes put back in, I guess, and I don't know that I remember this, but there was a TV release that had... Oh gosh, how many extra minutes was it? It almost turned it into like a 3-hour movie, I think.
That's something.
Yeah.
And this is Superman Returns?
No, this is the original Superman movie with Christopher Reeve.
Oh. That's going to have more scenes to it.
Yeah. So they have, they're calling it Superman the Movie, the Extended Cut. And it's going to be coming out on DVD and Blu-ray. Okay, so an extended cut of Superman the movie, a 3-hour version of the blockbuster that aired on TV in the 80s, will be made available in high definition from the Warner Archive soon. This is from comicbook.com. And they are, they're calling it, some places are calling it the extended cut, some are calling it the epic cut. And it restored 49 additional minutes to the film's runtime, and it debuted on ABC in 1982. Yeah, I guess what they did was they made it a 2-night event, and so they showed the first half of it on one night and the second half of it on the next night. There's extended elements of Krypton. You get to see more of Krypton in the beginning. I guess you get to see a little bit more of Smallville, and then some extended stuff in Metropolis and at the Fortress of Solitude. So they, and I guess adds obviously a little bit more character development and a little bit more action to it. So I most likely will go out and get this because I love Superman and I love Superman the movie, and I think I own every version of it. Jeff, you had then tweeted out in response an interesting question. Has there ever been a re-release of something that added additional footage that has been worth it or worthwhile?
Yeah, I mean, I just think of when I've seen or fallen for the trap or fallen into the trap of purchasing a movie because it's new footage added. You know, does the new footage really add much of anything to the story or to the movie? And I struggle to come up with an example where this footage was added, this movie is that much more enjoyable.
Do you count the Lord of the Rings ones? Because wasn't the Lord of the Rings, didn't they release the original Lord of the Rings and they were like the Lord of the Rings? And then when they came out again, there was the super extended version where each movie went from like being 2 hours long to 4 hours long.
There was like a 4-hour movie. Yeah. In fact, I think those were the copies my brother bought. I went as soon as they came out. I bought just the original DVD version, but my brother, the diehard Lord of the Rings fan, he bought all of the extended versions of all those movies. And yeah, I think most of them clocked in at about 4 hours.
Yeah. You know what? It's funny. As I say this, I'm having two thoughts. One is, oh, crud, now I need to go buy another soundtrack because I don't have the Lord of the Rings soundtrack. Number two, I got to watch those movies again. And then number three, I want to say that, I saw them in the theater, so I guess I saw only the 2-hour version, but then I bought the super extended hyper whatever version. So I think those are kind of like the only ones that I have, in my consciousness.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I don't know. What's your take on Lord of the Rings? Did it add or detract or no comment on the extended versions?
For me, those, it almost went on too long. It was cool, but I'm also not, I had not read the books. I think I'd read The Hobbit, and I think I'd started to read Fellowship of the Ring by the time those movies came out. And then at that point, I couldn't catch up with the movies coming out, and so I just kind of said, oh, fine, I'll just watch the movies. So I guess I'm not as diehard a fan of the books themselves, but my brother was. So I think to him, it was the chance to be able to see what he had always read on screen. And I think that's why he loved it. To me, I got the story that I needed to get in the official original theatrical releases, and those movies I felt like were long enough. It was cool to see some of the other stuff added in, but after I watched it once, it was not something that I felt like I was ever going to watch again. If I was going to go back and rewatch it, I would just watch the theatrical version. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would seek out the mega extended. I mean, I took issue with how long the movies were to begin with. So I don't necessarily know that I would seek out the added footage one. But again, I mean, like I said, I struggled to come up with a movie where it was re-released with extra footage, and that somehow the extra footage enhanced the movie in a way like it just became a better film.
Right. Yeah. The times I was trying to think of other movies, because I enjoy getting a DVD or a Blu-ray and going in and watching the deleted scenes. And sometimes I'll enjoy it when deleted scenes get added back into a movie. But I'm thinking of the only other example I can think of off the top of my head that happens to also be part of the Superman movies is when they did the Richard Donner cut a few years ago. And They took that footage from Superman 2, because with the change in directors from Richard Donner to Richard Lester, there was a total shift in the tone of the movie. And I bought that one. I bought that one on DVD, and I watched it when that one came out. And I really enjoyed watching what I guess would have been as close to what you could do with his take on the movie, whatever it was, 20 some years after the fact. I enjoyed watching it when I go back and rewatch Superman 2, I'm not going to rewatch the Richard Donner cut. I mean, I might pull it out and rewatch it every few years or so, just to remind myself. But the one I remember watching most is the theatrical version that was in theaters and then on TV for years and years and years. And that's the one that, as a family growing up, we watched that one. So, do I enjoy the Richard Donner cut? Yes, because I like seeing the take where it's a little bit more of a serious movie, and at times where there's a little less campiness and Zod's a little more menacing and some of that stuff. But is that the one that I'm going to watch more regularly? No, it's maybe just more of a spectacle than anything.
Right. And when you look at the likes of, I think the best example would be Star Wars or E.T. You had those movies that were re-released with extra footage that wasn't in the originals. And we know in the case of Star Wars, it did very little to enhance the story.
Right.
And, same thing with E.T. When Spielberg made or put added footage into E.T. and made some changes to E.T., he was met with a lot of flack, and he used that as a learning lesson for himself. He walked away from that saying, as much as maybe the movie I made in the 80s isn't the movie that I wanted to make or that I take umbrage with now, once a movie's released, it belongs to the fans. And you're messing with their memories and you're messing with their feelings about a movie, and you can't do that to a fan.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I see, for me, a lot of times, and again, this is, as I've often said, maybe it's because I'm a simpleton, I always kind of fall into the trap of more movie, more better. So for me, like, oh, wow, 4-hour Lord of the Rings, I'll take it. This is going to be awesome. And, oh, wow, there's going to be, added scenes for this. And so I would say for the majority of times, I always am curious to see what the director's cut is. And so many times, like, I'll watch the director's cut first, or, before, if I had a choice, if it's on the DVD and I've never seen the movie, 9 times out of 10, I'll throw the director's cut on just because I want to see that whole thing. Now, that being said, sometimes the director's cuts are, it's just like how can I say this? If it's done the right way, then my thought is always, well, if that's what the director wanted to do, why didn't he do it? Was it a case of money? Was it a case of the editors telling him, or whoever cuts down the movie says, okay, well, this is going to run too long, or the content's too inappropriate, or it doubles up other scenes, it's not needed material? Or was it just, he wasn't able to, he wasn't, for whatever reason, he really wanted to make that vision. So that's what I'm always curious with the director's cuts is, well, what did the director really want to put out the first time, and why couldn't he? As opposed to sometimes, and I think maybe the Star Wars stuff kind of fell into this trap, was, I like watching deleted scenes, for curiosity's sake, but I can see why they're out of the movie because it didn't add anything to it. And so I guess if it's a case of that, I guess I would just rather go on the DVD or the Blu-ray or whatever and watch the 10 deleted scenes. Just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just shoot down the deleted scenes and say, oh, okay, that's cool. That would have been cool to see in there, but I can understand why they kept them out.
Yeah.
But do you guys get what I'm saying? It's kind of like there's two different ways to look at it. Are they just throwing in more deleted scenes just to sell more DVDs, or was this really what the director wanted to do, but he couldn't for one reason or another? And so I guess that kind of informs me informs my decision on whether I'm going to get the director's cut or not.
Right. Well, and I think a big reason for the director's cut is that's what the director originally wanted to do, but much like songs on the radio, you got to keep it to a certain length. What is it? There's a Billy Joel song, and he mentions you got to keep it down to like 3:05 or something like that for a song on the radio. And I think a lot of it is more of the, American audiences or movie-going audiences are not going to watch a movie that's beyond an hour and a half or beyond 2 hours, or nowadays it seems like there's particularly for action movies, there's a take that that 2.5 hour mark. Don't go past that if you're doing an action movie, because nobody's going to want to go past 2.5 hours. Well, if it's a good movie, sure. Braveheart goes past 2.5 hours, and I'll watch that one left and right. But I think a lot of it is the studios wanting to keep that runtime down so that they can, have more showings of it in the theater, and just want to kind of keep the thing as trim and quickly moving as possible. I think of some of the ones that have maybe totally changed the way the movie comes out looking, and that's like Blade Runner. The Blade Runner director's cut. I mean, there's been a ton of different Blade Runner cuts that have come out over the years. Same thing with Aliens. Aliens had a couple of different versions too. And, some of those different versions of the movie, they totally change the tone, totally change even the outcome of the movie in some ways.
Right.
All right. Well, yeah. So I thought that was a good question, Jeff. When you tweeted that out, I thought that was a good question, worthy of talking about for a few minutes. And like I said, I think I'm probably going to go. At the very least, I will rent the Superman Extended Edition just to see what the extra stuff is. I don't know if I'll buy it or not, but I'll at least take a look at it. All right.
Yeah, I mean, if you buy it, I'd be interested in watching it.
Okay. Yeah.
But I don't necessarily know that I would go out and buy it myself, unless it does somehow really enhance the storytelling of Superman.
Yeah. All right. Well, shall we? You know what? Before we jump on into talking about our movie that we've got for this week, I did want to say a very quick happy birthday to one movie and one man. The movie Happy Birthday, Princess Bride turns 30 today.
Wow.
So, and then happy birthday to Mark Hamill, who turns 30 plus maybe a couple of years today.
Oh, wow.
So it's Princess Bride and Luke Skywalker's birthday today.
So we reached the point in class today watching Princess Bride when Inigo Montoya gets his revenge on Count Rugen. And
yes.
The class applauded.
Nice.
So they got it. They're in.
So basically, they have all exceeded the standards.
Yes.
Nice. Every kid in that class is getting an A.
Mark it 4, dude.
That's outstanding.
So I do have two more things I want to mention real briefly before we get into batteries.
Yeah, go for it.
So this goes back to our Spaceballs podcast. The auction for Dark Helmet's helmet is over.
Okay.
Did you hear who got it?
Was it Chris Hardwick?
It was Chris Hardwick.
I would listen to their Hostful podcast maybe about a week ago, and I heard him talking about it. I didn't know for certain if he had got it or not, but
yeah, so he got it. And then he had Max Brooks, author Max Brooks, on the podcast, who's Mel's son.
Yeah.
And Max says to him, you know what, just bring it by the office. My dad will sign it for you.
Would it be nice to know all those people?
How about it, right? I'm just like,
yeah.
Oh, and here I am in my car.
Right.
Okay, good. Good for you, Chris Hardwick.
Just stop by the office and Dad will sign it.
And whose dad, whose kid said this?
Mel Brooks.
Mel Brooks' son, Max, is an author. So Max was being interviewed, and Chris was talking to him about how he got into an online, wage auction battle and ended up winning the helmet. And Max said, well, if you ever want it signed, just bring it by the office and my dad will sign it for you.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That's outstanding.
The last piece of Hollywood news I want to throw out there is, I don't know if you heard, X-Files is coming back, I think, for a 10-episode season.
Okay. I think I did hear that. I still have not had a chance to go back and rewatch, what was it, 6 episodes?
Yeah, I haven't seen those either.
A couple years ago.
They've all been pulled off of Netflix, so I never got a chance to finish the regular run. But what I wanted to bring up was that they are bringing back an actress from the first season. No, not the first season, from the first go-round of the show.
Okay.
And she is from everyone's favorite episode titled Home.
Mm-hmm.
It's the amputee mother that lived under the bed.
Oh, you're kidding.
So that actress will be back, although they're saying she's not going to be back in the same role.
Okay.
Which it would be interesting to see if she did come back in that same role. But they brought her into. I think they said she may be playing a number of characters, whatever that means in X-Files universe.
Yeah, that episode still gives me chills.
Yeah. I just think about it now. I'm not going to sleep tonight.
Mm-hmm. And talk about use of music in that episode. With every time they pull up or they leave in the classic car they've got, and they're always playing it sounds like the old 50s songs. And
oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, that was a good episode.
It was disturbing beyond belief.
Yes, good, but disturbing beyond belief, which could describe any one of us as well.
True, very true.
There you go. Basically, we are home. Why don't we dive on into batteries not included here? And very quickly, let me say that we do spoil the events of the movies that we talk about. So if this is your first time here, we're going to spoil the events of this movie. We're going to talk about the story. We're going to talk about the characters. So if you have not seen it yet, you may want to back up, go watch the movie, and then come on back. That being said, let's jump on into some information, some behind-the-scenes stuff on Batteries Not Included. It came out on the 18th of December, 1987. Rated PG with a runtime of 1 hour and 46 minutes. Directed by Matthew Robbins, who also directed Corvette Summer and Dragon Slayer. Producer was Ronald L. Schwary, who also did Ordinary People, Scent of a Woman, and Meet Joe Black. Writers on this one were Mick Garris, who did the story. He also wrote Hocus Pocus, Critters 2, and The Fly 2. Screenplay on this one's written by a whole bunch of different people. Brad Bird, I believe this was one of his first screenplays, but he eventually went on to do The Iron Giant, The Incredibles, and Ratatouille. Matthew Robbins, the director, also wrote an early treatment for George Lucas's Electronic Labyrinth THX 11384EB, which eventually would become THX 1138. He also wrote Corvette Summer and Crimson Peak. Brent Maddock did Short Circuit, Tremors, and Wild Wild West, and S.S. Wilson also did Short Circuit, Tremors, and Wild Wild West. Cinematography was done by John McPherson, who died in 2007. He did cinematography for The Incredible Hulk TV show and Jaws: The Revenge. James Horner did the music. He died in 2015. We've just talked a lot about him over the last 3 episodes. He did Titanic, Braveheart, Rocketeer, and Star Trek II, among many other things. Budget for this one was $25 million, and the box office was $65.1 million. Hume Cronin, who died in 2003. So a lot of the actors in this movie, even some of the ones that are not that old, have died since making this movie. So that's a little sad. But Hume Cronin died in 2003. He was Frank Riley. He was in Cocoon, Shadow of a Doubt, and The Pelican Brief. Jessica Tandy died in 1994. She was Faye Riley. She was in The Birds, Driving Miss Daisy, and Fried Green Tomatoes. Frank McRae was Harry Noble, was in Rocky II, 48 Hours, and License to Kill. Elizabeth Pena died in 2014. She was Marissa Estival. She was in La Bamba, The Incredibles, and Rush Hour. Michael Carmine died in 1989. He was Carlos. He was in Leviathan and Band of the Hand. Dennis Boutsikaris was Mason Baylor. He was in The Bourne Legacy and Better Call Saul. Tom Eldridge, who died in 2011, was Sid Hodgson. Cold Mountain, What About Bob? Jane Hoffman, who died in 2004, was Muriel Hodgson. She was in Deconstructing Harry and In and Out. John DeSanti was Gus. He was in The Presidio. John Pankow was Kovacs, the driver for Mr. Lacey. He was in Mad About You and To Live and to Die in L.A. And Michael Green played Lacey. He was in To Live and Die in L.A. and Less Than Zero. Rotten Tomatoes, the critics have given this one a 60%. Audience gives it a 63%. And I picked out 3 different critics, all actually from Chicago publications. Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune said, "This film is so harmless, it's boring," and gave it 2 out of 4 stars. Jonathan Rosenbaum from the Chicago Reader said, "The extraterrestrial elves who thrive on electricity and replicate themselves out of scrap metal are no less charming, and the special effects show them off gracefully." Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times said, Cronin and Tandy rescue the movie from looking altogether like a retread, and the saucers do their part too. Designed by Industrial Light and Magic, the visual effects wizards, the saucers swoop and vibrate and blink and purr and even have children, which they assemble out of old toasters and other household appliances. Batteries Not Included is a sweet, cheerful, and funny family entertainment, and he gave it a 3 out of 4 stars. Cinema Score gave it a B+. The awards for this one, it won the Saturn Award for Best Actress, Jessica Tandy, the Young Artist Award for Best Family Motion Picture Comedy. And a quick summary of the story. Frank and Faye Riley, played by Hume Cronin and Jessica Tandy, are an elderly New York couple living in a depressed part of town. There, they run a diner as well as an apartment building, which is home to a poor but friendly group of people. One day, Frank and Faye learn that property developer wants them to sell the apartment. When they refuse, their diner is vandalized. However, Frank, Faye, and their tenants are aided by mysterious flying saucers, which help them repair the diner and fight back.
The residents of 817 East 8th Street are about to lose everything they have.
What do you mean those tenants are still in there?
Tonight. I'll have them out by tonight.
Nothing in this world can save them. Nothing but a miracle. Steven Spielberg presents a Matthew Robbins film.
Welcome to America. Spaceships from a very small planet. Very small. This is history.
Machines that reproduce themselves.
I like being a family again.
What the hell is that?
It's them, the little guys.
I don't know how you got here or why you picked us.
Somebody's helping them. Somebody's bringing them together.
Is that why you're here?
Batteries Not Included, starring Hume Cronin and Jessica Tandy.
I kind of feel like other than there was an entry on the Industrial Light and Magic website that talks a little bit about, some of the motion capture that they did, but it doesn't really say much. It's almost just like a resume entry that, here's something we did. I took a few days to try to do some research on this movie, and sometimes you'll find websites that say hey, it's the 30th anniversary of Princess Bride. Where are the actors now? 15 things. No, they never do round numbers like that. 17.3 things you never knew about Breakfast Club. Websites like that, I could find nothing for Batteries Not Included.
Huh.
I found absolutely nothing. So I do not have any other background information on this one. The only things that I did find were just different reviews that people wrote at the time, and it got mixed reviews when it came out. I have one in particular review that I will mention a little bit later because it kind of comments on a criticism that this person had of Spielberg and his movies, especially at the time. And I did have the only other interesting thing I found, and maybe you guys have seen this, and I kind of felt like I had seen this at one point, but I don't know if it's just the paranoia of the internet playing on me. The only other thing that I found was there are a ton of people that are totally convinced that there was a sequel called Batteries Still Not Included. And I feel like I thought there was, but people, there are all these Reddit threads and people searching online saying, I was totally convinced. I had a VHS of the sequel to Batteries Not Included. It didn't have the original actors in it because they had passed away, but I'm convinced I had a VHS, but I've never seen it on DVD. Can somebody help me find it? And there's all these people responding saying, dude, there's no mention of that movie anywhere. No mention of a sequel anywhere on the internet. IMDb, no other mention of a Batteries Not Included too. So that was the only thing consistently that I could find about this movie.
Huh.
So there's a few YouTube videos here and there of people trying to kind of make their own replica props of the robots, of the little flying saucers from the movie. But yeah, no, other than that, none. I think even the DVD copy that I had of this didn't have any extras on it. So there just doesn't seem to be a whole lot of information out there on it.
They made the movie they wanted to make, and then they got out. That was it. Bam, done.
I guess so. So we'll start with our typical question. Is this the first time you watched this movie? And if not, when did you see this for the first time? And I will start by saying I saw this probably not long after it came out in the theater, probably when it came out on VHS. I do remember seeing it once, and this, watching it just a couple of days ago, was probably the first time in nearly 30 years that I had seen it. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
What about you, Jeff?
I remember watching this a bit when I was a kid. I think we must have taped it off of HBO or something. I have the DVD of it. It was a happy accident. I found it in a $5 sale bin at Walmart or something, so I snagged it up right away. I'll watch this movie every other year or so. I mean, I really like this film, and the more that I watch it, the more that I feel like I'm getting something or making some sort of connection to it. And I'll leave it at that for now. I'll share some of my thoughts about it after watching it the other day, once we start getting into that. But Pat, what's your background with?
I think I'm going to take John's idea, or John's answer. I want to say I saw this. This was kind of like one of the family movies that we watched. I don't know if we would have gone to the theater or if we would have rented it. But I saw it from a young age, and then I was always aware of it. Like I think Tammy's grandma was a big fan of this movie. This one and what was the one? Johnny Five is Alive. Short Circuit.
Yeah, Short Circuit.
I think she really liked both of those movies. And so I remember, when we'd go visit Tammy's grandma, that would always be on her movie shelf, that she was a big fan of this movie. And I'll be honest, John, I'm going to take your thing. I don't think I've seen this for the last 30 years, but it's funny how everything just came back when I was watching it. I'm like, I remember that scene. I remember that scene. I remember that, I remember that guy. I remember this. Oh, wow, that scene happened before, and I remember seeing it and not quite getting totally what it meant, but now as an adult, that makes more sense, So yeah, that would be, I think I'm going to take John's answer and stick to it as well. I think this might have only been the second time I've seen it.
Wow, okay.
So I'm gonna say something that I don't normally say, and that is I'm going to agree with Gene Siskel a little bit about this movie. I remember liking it.
I said, oh.
Yeah. I remember liking it as a kid. I remember thinking it was cool. I was like, oh yeah, look at all those things moving around. And the little, I do remember, it must have been from the trailer, maybe, because I remember seeing this multiple times. The little baby robot kind of dancing around while they were flipping the burgers on the grill. And I remember those scenes, like you said, Pat. I hadn't seen it in 30 years, but it just all started to come back watching it this time around. But watching it as an adult and watching it, I'm pretty convinced that my kids would absolutely love this. We didn't watch it with the kids this time, but I'm pretty convinced the kids would love it. My thing with the movie is, as an adult, I loved the acting. I thought the actors had great performances in it. I liked the little, how you got each of the different characters and where they were coming from, and you had the pregnant single mother and the struggling artist and the older couple that was just trying to hold on to what they had, and all that stuff I really, really liked. But overall, as a movie, I'm going to take the quote from Gene Siskel. I'm going to take out the last part of it. And I'm going to say, I don't think the movie was boring. His quote that I had from his Tribune review was, "This film is so harmless, it's boring." I don't think it was boring, but I think it is harmless. I think that there are, I don't know, when I look at this movie, I compare it, I think I automatically compare it to two different movies, just based on who's in it and who produced it. I compare this one to E.T. and I compare this one to Cocoon. And when I think of this movie compared to those other two, this one falls way short for me. And it doesn't mean that I didn't enjoy the movie. It just means I'm not probably going to rewatch this one. If I wanted to go back and rewatch a movie that I thought had some similar themes to it, I probably would go back and either rewatch Cocoon or I'd rewatch E.T. Or if I was even going to watch a movie about, people trying to fight against real estate developers, I might go watch Goonies, or I might watch Up, or, any one of these other movies where somebody's trying to hold out against a real estate developer. But I don't know. Eventually, I might show it to the kids, but I don't know that I will ever go back and rewatch this one again.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And not that I didn't like it. It just didn't. It had great performances, but it just didn't. I don't think it strikes me the same way it strikes you.
Clearly not.
Yeah.
So Jeff, do you want to get in there and give some of your thoughts there on it?
Well, I definitely think that the acting by Hugh Cronin and Jessica Tandy is impeccable in this movie. They are so wonderful as the old couple that. So she has dementia. She's got some sort of Alzheimer's or something where her memory isn't what it used to be, and you have Frank, who is, his struggle is to keep up with the times. Mm-hmm. He's clearly, set in his ways. He refers to the neighbors by who used to live in their apartments.
Right.
When they needed a flashlight, the one guy's got a flashlight, he comes holding a lantern. So it's definitely showing how this character is someone that almost refuses to deal with progress, as progress is literally happening all around him. And I think there's something really unique in that struggle that you make. You make he and his wife the forefront characters in the movie. When you have a younger cast as well, but when you choose to have the older couple as the main protagonists, I thought it was just a very interesting choice that you would have the old couple as the main character. And like I said, the two of them, every ounce of their performance is absolutely incredible. And what I was cluing into this time when I watched it the other day, I found myself getting emotional, because for some reason this time, more so than any other time, I saw my grandmother in Jessica Tandy, and I saw her battle with dementia towards the end of her life, and a lot of it just seemed so real all of a sudden. So I was very struck that this movie that I've seen countless times all of a sudden had that moment for me where it was like watching something new, watching something for the first time. And I just love that the movie could do that.
Cool.
But I definitely appreciate the fact that, they gave the older couple the limelight, and to help underscore that, pun slightly intended, you look at the music of this movie, and the music is great. You have a lot of the older, like the older big band type sound as a lot of the underscoring, which is just marvelous. So I don't know. I love that it appreciates an older generation.
Well, and that your comment about giving the older couple the limelight in this movie, that was a thing that I thought was really interesting about this, and to its credit, I thought that was outstanding, was that this is, if I had to think about it, this, I almost look at this as like a children's movie. that it's got the playful little robots, and this is something you probably, you see the trailer for this, you're probably going to take your kids into this movie, but it's also a movie I think for all ages, because you could have grandparents could take their grandkids to this movie, and they're both going to have something that they appreciate. And I think that's kind of a rare thing, especially now. I don't think you'd see too many movies that could be geared towards kids with an elderly couple as your main characters.
Yeah.
I mean, it's part of what makes this film so unique, and I think so special, is that they allowed that to happen. They allowed those characters to be the driving force of the struggle within the movie.
Yeah, and I was struck by that too. What I remember from being a kid, everything came back, and I remember, okay, this is the one about the robots, or the robot, the alien, the mechanical aliens, I should say, and all the people that they helped. But then when I watched it, it was kind of like, well, not really. It's about the people, and you guys are gonna laugh, especially when I compare this to something. I almost, as you were describing it, I almost thought of when Michael Bay redid Transformers, and one of the knocks that the fan base had on it was, wow, this really isn't about the robots, the Transformers. This is more about the people, and then the Transformers are just kind of in it. And that's kind of what struck me between the first time I saw it 30 years ago and then the second time I saw it, 30 hours ago, was, oh, just like you said, this is really a story about people, and especially that elderly couple. The robots, that's just kind of they're just characters that are in it. That's kind of partly what makes the movie unique, is, okay, it's about these mechanical aliens. So that took me by surprise, because I did not remember that from growing up watching it.
One thing I did want to mention, you mentioned the acting and how it's got the older couple as the main characters. One of the things that I was able to find, like I said, couldn't find a whole bunch of backstory on this, but one of the things I was able to find was that I did like that series of black and white photos at the beginning to kind of, show you the progression of the neighborhood and who used to live there. I did find out those are actual photos of Hume Cronin and Jessica Tandy, who were married in real life.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
So those were actual real life photos of the two of them together.
Cool. Yeah, and I also want to take a second. I want to second what Jeff said. I love the soundtrack for this, and the big band music was, growing up, that was my favorite kind of music. I still venture, if I had to pick, I'd probably say that's still my favorite kind of music to listen to. And that was the first stuff that I really got into seriously and bought albums and all that. So, and I don't remember that soundtrack from the movie. That could quite possibly have been one of the big reasons why I enjoyed this movie as a kid too, because given when the movie came out and my age, that was right when I was getting real serious about listening to music. And I really, really thought it was cool that the soundtrack was so rooted in that big band sound. So I know I'm probably kind of being a little bit scattershot with my comments, but I just wanted to jump in there and agree with Jeff. I really, really like the big band sound for this music.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said earlier, I think one of the things I remember most about this was the special effects aspect of it, the making, the kind of bringing the little characters. I think, were they called the Fix-Its? I think that's what they called them.
Okay.
The kind of bringing the Fix-Its to life, and even watching it this time, I was thinking, okay, well, is this movie going to look a little dated? And sure, there were a couple of times here and there where the motion capture or the stop motion animation looked a little dated, but I mean, it's Industrial Light and Magic, so I know that they do a bang up job every time they do something. So watching it I was just kind of struck on, when this movie came out, this would have been pretty amazing. And like they really brought these little characters, the little non-human characters to life. And the fact that you have, you start out and you've got the couple of Fix-Its who then have the little baby Fix-Its. And, I think that was what I remember most. Like you said, I think, Pat, you mentioned earlier, as a kid, you remember the robot parts and the little robots flying around and getting into mischief and all that stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess, if I'm trying to like not be combative, I guess where some of the critics got on with it, I mean, I guess I could see where, they were saying they didn't take a risk because, they never explored the Alzheimer's thing other than to establish it as the character. They never really explored hey, time is moving on and he doesn't want to change with the times. They never really explored the whole, that the woman that was pregnant, but the husband or the father or whatever it was, he didn't really hang with them. I mean, they never really explored beyond enough to establish those characters in the movie. But that being said, I think for a kid's movie, you don't need more than that.
Well, and even for an adult movie, let's say this was geared more for adults, you don't necessarily need to have that well fleshed out backstory. If they didn't go there, then they didn't go there for a reason. And you have to then start to wonder, well, then why didn't they tell us more about these characters? They told us what we needed to know about them, so we could draw our own conclusions as to why these machines came to help these people. And maybe the message there is, it doesn't matter what your struggle is or where in your life you are, there's help there. There's always somebody or something willing to help you out.
Cool.
So that's an interesting point, because this was the other thing I was going to bring up. One of the other critics, I thought this was an interesting quote from Rita Kempley of the Washington Post, and she wrote this in '87 after this movie had come out. And she said one of the sentences in her review was, "Though directed by Matthew Robbins, it is an Amblin Entertainment feature rooted in the Spielbergian credo, quote, Earthlings cannot cope without the little men upstairs." And she kind of makes a point of saying, Spielberg might have written himself into a bit of a rut here. All of his stories are about aliens that come to save us. And I don't know. I don't know that I agree with that. I mean, I feel like all of his stories are very heartfelt stories, that they are, while they might feature aliens or robots or whatever, that it's really about the human characters and the heart of the whole thing. But at the same time, I realize she does kind of have a point. That's, if you look back at a lot of Spielberg's early stuff, he tends to have a few stories here and there where we got to have aliens come and save us.
Well, so outside of E.T. and Close Encounters, what else can we come up with?
I'm thinking of, wasn't he also one of the kind of executive producers on the Amazing Stories?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking, take out the word aliens, I'm thinking of, divine intervention. Whether it's aliens or whether it's something else, that there does seem to be a theme running through a lot of his early stuff of divine intervention. And she kind of, I don't know, this person kind of wrote it as if it's a negative. I don't know that I see it as a negative. I just think I see it as that's something that appealed to him and something he believed in, and so he let that seep into his work.
Yeah, I don't see that as being a knock, especially because his work is so diverse that to pigeon all of his work into that one mold, I think, is wrong. If you want to take a couple of examples of movies he did and say it falls into that trope, what about the other 75, 85% of his work that doesn't?
Right.
So I think I don't know. I don't agree with her.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like someone that just doesn't like the movie, trying to find some higher level esoteric reason for not liking the movie other than they just didn't like the movie.
Well,
Did that statement make any sense at all? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think it could also be hey, we've got this up and coming young director that has had a lot of success. That's an easy target. Let's pick on him.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And he's a young up and coming director. He's trying to pitch ideas and get the ideas accepted and all that. So, I mean, you never know what kind of things he's going to deal with when he pitches a movie. It might be, well, okay, but, we're really fascinated by aliens now in our culture. So make sure there's some kind of an alien component.
Right.
Or, hey, we're trying to get kids in here and, okay, cute little robotic aliens, that's going to get them excited. It's just like, that seemed to be what was selling, just like now it's superheroes.
Yeah.
So every show and every movie and everything that's coming out now has some dude in a mask or some chick in a mask running around fighting crime. Well, okay, that's just kind of what's happening. So I don't think just because, what did you say? 3 of his movies are about aliens. I don't think we can, I don't think we can pigeonhole him.
I'm looking up his producer credits, and I'm failing to come up with a large example of this trope where you needed the outside thing to happen.
Well, and I that's why I thought that was kind of interesting, because she would have been, her review was from 1987, so she would have been writing this from 1987, and at that point in his career, I couldn't think of too many other things that he would have done that would have had, aliens or little men upstairs coming to save the day.
Yeah, so I'm looking at his list of producer credits specifically from this time period, from Batteries Not Included beforehand, just to see what else he may have produced. Harry and the Hendersons, he was an executive producer. Amazing Stories, he was an executive producer. Poltergeist, he was a producer on, and he did more than just that with Poltergeist.
Right.
But I'm looking at these going, so is she trying to say that in his trope, something needs to happen to the people to help bring the people together? So the MacGuffin is whatever this outside thing is, whether it be aliens or robots or ghosts or whatever.
Right.
Is she trying to imply that he depends on that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I don't see that in his, and I don't think that's a particularly, to use her words, Spielbergian thing to do, is to have, some outside force show humans that they need to learn a lesson about themselves. That's not a Spielberg thing.
No, and that was going to be my next point, is that how many other directors have done that?
Yeah.
Or producers or writers or creative Hollywood people look to the outside thing to help the characters understand themselves.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah. I'm kind of with Pat. I think maybe she was looking for a way of sounding knowledgeable.
Yeah. It's she was going for the clickbait before there was clickbait.
Yeah. Or maybe she was just trying to stand out.
Yeah.
Amongst the thousands of reviewers.
Yeah. So there you go, Rita. I don't even know if she's still alive.
Well, and here's a thought too.
But if she is, she's listening to the podcast.
Well, mowing the lawn. Yeah. Well, and here's a thought too. Sometimes, what's the phrase? You don't see the forest for the trees, or you see the forest. I don't know, but there's the phrase about the forest and the trees, and not the one about if something falls in the wood doesn't make a sound. But
and the two birds in a hand. Yeah.
Exactly. you know, and I think, let me put it this way. What was the movie where the two guys made the girl, the Weird Science?
Yeah,
was
Weird
that Weird
Science.
Science?
Yep.
Yeah.
So when we watched that movie and we broke it down, and it was the first time we saw it, I came at it and thought, you know, this wasn't my thing. Growing up, I never liked watching movies that were set in, well, the quote-unquote real world about kids. I never liked watching teen drama movies. It wasn't my thing.
Yeah, girls are not your thing.
What was that?
Girls are not your thing. That's fine.
Yeah, girls are not my thing. Definitely not. Now, women. Okay. So it just was not my thing. And I remember when we broke down the movie, we all kind of hit on it from the comedy standpoint, or this standpoint, was that John Hughes too?
Yeah.
That did Weird Science? Was it?
Yeah, pretty sure.
Okay, and so we talked, and then I think the discussion was, oh, okay, well, is John Hughes, what was the best John Hughes movie? And we hit it from that standpoint. And I remember talking to my brother, and I just said, hey, yeah, Weird Science. And he kind of not shuddered, but he kind of shrugged his shoulders, and he just said, yeah, I don't know. I don't like that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, what do you mean? Just out of curiosity, what were your thoughts on it? And he said, yeah, I really don't like the idea of the kids that are into science and math and, engineering. I really don't like the idea that they're the nerds. I think that's lame. I don't like that. And my brother obviously not obviously, but my brother's an engineer. And he said, yeah, for so long, basically all we said were the cool kids were the ones that play football, and the non-cool kids are the ones that are like the engineers or the mathematicians or the scientists. And then, his point was, and what are we dealing with now? Well, we're dealing with now other countries outstripping us in the sciences and the math. And, there's other countries making advances in space exploration. Okay, so why am I getting into this long, convoluted story? You never know what someone is bringing to a movie. Like, we might just be seeing this movie as, a cute little kid story, or a story for all ages. And Jeff, you're honing in on things that made you think of your grandparents, and wow, this is a story about people on the on the older side of life, and man, there's so many facets to it. This reviewer could have been coming at it from a different standpoint, coming from it like, why are we continually showing society as not being able to help ourselves? Humans need to be able to, solve their own problems, not have them solved by someone else. I can't explain it anymore because I don't necessarily share those thoughts, but you never know what someone is bringing to a movie when they see it, and something just on a deeper level might trigger something with them like, boy, I really just don't like the nature of this. I brought up, the Weird Science and my brother's negative reaction to the way that kids that are into sciences are treated like nerds. American Pie. I really don't like those movies. I get real sick and tired of hearing the constant knocks on kids that are in the arts and music and the ripping on Bandcamp and all the, not just, it was just like, okay, yeah, that was funny for about 30 seconds. Let's move on. There's nothing you're going to do to change my mind. I don't like those movies because that sticks in my craw. So again, I'm not saying that the reviewer is right, but they might just be seeing this movie on a completely different level than what we're looking at, because something just triggers this, wow, I don't like the idea of us always having to go off planet for our help. We should, as a society, we should help ourselves. I'm not saying it's right, but that maybe is just kind of what they're seeing, the lens that they're seeing this movie through.
I'm going to interject and say that one movie made me more interested in Bandcamp, even though I never went.
Okay.
I was curious to find out more about it.
You wanted to play the flute is what you wanted to do.
Well,
So then, let's say maybe these movies are made to help us see that we don't need to rely on other things. Mm-hmm. We do have what we need all along.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but okay.
Maybe that's the point of making these movies.
So for this one in particular, though, let me play devil's advocate to that, which is also a great movie. I don't think that they could have done anything. I mean, I think they were about ready to give up, or they didn't have any other options before you had the divine intervention of the Fix-Its coming in and helping them fix everything. Because I don't know that the old couple, I don't know that there was anything else that they could have done if they didn't have their diner, magically and miraculously repaired for them. So I don't know if that fits for this particular movie, because I think they kind of had. I agree with you. A lot of times we, in those movies, we as humans find out, well, we had everything that we needed within ourselves all along. We just needed a little inspiration. This one, I don't know. I don't know if they
call it inspiration. Call it some sort of just faith, some sort of sign that people see all over the place all the time.
Yeah.
In this case, the sign for these people happened to be the idea of these little robot things, and that was enough of a trigger for them to keep having faith that things were going to work out.
Yeah.
I mean, is it highly romanticized? Absolutely. But what's wrong with that?
Right. Maybe it does not have a deeper meaning beyond it's just supposed to be a heartwarming story.
Right.
Yeah.
With a little sci-fi. I mean, and that's where I say, you get into the are you seeing the forest for the trees kind of thing, is something triggered this reviewer. Something triggered like, oh, I don't like movies that do that. Well, okay, I don't necessarily think they're the movie's trying to communicate on that level. It might just be a story. It might just be, hey, I want to tell this story that we can sit down and enjoy. And I think sometimes critics are always looking for, well, this deeper meaning and this super huge connection, or, wow, let's explore, why that one guy was the bad guy, but then he went in to save the old woman, to get her out of the building, and then he came to give her flowers, and maybe he was maybe he was abused as a child, or maybe let's explore it deeper and really follow that plot thread down, or okay, let's follow that old couple all the way to where she dies and she had Alzheimer's all the way up to the end, and they really they try to have the happier moments in life, but maybe critics always want every movie to have this real deep emotional ride, and maybe Spielberg just wanted to tell a story. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Well, and actually, something else I did find just now in doing some Googling while we've been talking is that originally this movie was meant to be an episode of the Amazing Stories TV series.
I read that.
Yeah, but the Spielberg liked the idea. He just was so fascinated by it. He's like, no, I want to see this done as a full-length movie. And it kind of has that same flavor of some of those stories. It's just, there's not a huge deeper meaning to the whole thing. I mean, maybe there's maybe in some of those there's a bit of a morality tale, or it's a little bit of the, maybe you've got a little bit of the message like you do in some of the Twilight Zone, the old Twilight Zone episodes, where there's some kind of a little message in there, but it's not something that maybe is meant to be overly digested and picked apart and analyzed, and it's just fun. It's just a nice little movie. It's we're not going to have graduate level classes taught on over analyzing this movie.
Right, and again, if you want to say, if the idea is, well, let's show something where the human race is helping themselves and whatnot, and we don't need to rely on aliens, well, then tell a real life story. Tell a real life story. I mean, tell a story of how, people came together after 9/11, or how people, on a sinking ship, a true story, how they did the miracle on the Hudson. Tell a real story. Because the problem is, as soon as you set foot into fiction, you can make it as realistic as possible, but it's fiction. You can make up whatever you want. I mean, it's kind of like,
yeah, look at Pearl Harbor.
Well, yeah, but that's my point. So, I mean, for this critic to come back and say, well, we want to see humans helping humans, so you tell a story about how humans help humans. Well, if it's fictional, someone could always come along and say, well, that's bupkis. No one's going to do that in real life. if you're going to go that route, then you got to tell a real story. You got to search around and find out where people came together to help other people. Because otherwise, you could make fiction. You can make fiction do whatever you want. Just because it doesn't. I mean, here, devil's advocate here. Just let's say they rewrite the story and it's about the people helping themselves and it doesn't involve aliens coming down. Well, if it's fictional, then how do you know that would happen in real life? I mean, how is that more inspirational? I just don't, if you want to make something realistic, you got to make it real.
Yeah.
If you start making it fiction, there's always going to be a degree of BS in there.
And I will say I did, kind of tying this to another movie, I did appreciate the closing shots where you see this little building in the midst of all the other much taller buildings. And yes. It reminded me so much of the little house in the Pixar movie Up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, is there anything in terms of recommending this movie to others? Like I've said, Jeff, you obviously have a much more personal connection to this movie, and it speaks to you on a totally different level, than it does, I think, for the rest of us. For me, would I recommend this movie to somebody? Yes, I would recommend this movie. It doesn't necessarily have a deeper meaning for me. It's not necessarily something that I'm going to go rewatch regularly. Is it a fun little movie? Absolutely. Is it one that I think you could watch no matter what age you are? Absolutely. Does the CGI type stuff, the motion capture, not motion capture, stop motion, does all that hold up pretty well? Absolutely. So, I mean, I think if you're looking for a movie that any age could watch, and it's not something that you got to spend a whole lot of time, necessarily thinking about and struggling through and all that, I think it's a great little movie to watch. It just, for me, for my purposes, I've seen it now a couple of times in my life, and unless maybe I watch it with the kids, I don't know that I'm going to rewatch it, but definitely worth giving it a try if you haven't before.
I would agree with that. I mean, this is going to be very general and very cliche.
Yeah, go for it.
And any movie that you watch, you're going to bring your own stuff to it, and you're going to find your own connection to it. Is everyone going to find a connection to this movie like I did? No, clearly not, because the two of you didn't, and I did. But I think this movie, even if I didn't have that connection to it, I would still enjoy this movie. I'd still watch it again and again, because I just think it's a lot of fun. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a fun movie. I enjoyed it as a kid. I enjoyed it when I watch it again now. I mean, especially for me, it would be wanting to show it to younger generations, like, sit down and have a movie night with Dominic and Daniela. And, I think that could be pretty cool.
All right. Well, is there anything else, any final thoughts we want to say on it, or have we?
So after you just said that about how this was supposed to be on Amazing Stories.
Yeah.
I remember having read that somewhere, and I had the question I wanted to ask you guys.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, first of all, this question only works if you're somewhat familiar with Amazing Stories. But is there an episode of Amazing Stories, a different one that you would want to see turned into a full-length movie? Or do you just not have enough memory of the Amazing Stories?
Well,
that's a good question.
I've got my favorite Amazing Story, but I don't know if it would make a great movie.
Which one?
The one with the bomber and the artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called The Mission, that episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
I also kind of like the one where all the 80s characters popped out of the television in the kid's house.
Mm-hmm.
That would just be fun for nostalgia and all that, but
I'd like to, I think the Ghost Train episode could lend itself to a very interesting movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The synopsis of that episode is, Opa Globe is convinced it is his destiny to board a train he inadvertently caused to crash 75 years ago, and tells his 9-year-old grandson the old Highball Express will careen through their house. I think that can make for a fascinating movie.
Yeah.
But again, I wasn't sure how familiar you guys are or were with the specific episodes. But it was just, the question popped in my mind. Is there another episode that you think could be or could work as a full-length movie? Or same thing with any short story miniseries. Stephen King's Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Is there anything in that group of stories that you think could work as a full-length film? Or if you're not familiar with that, then...
Yeah, no, I don't know that I remember watching them, but I don't know that I remember any of the individual stories well enough to be able to pick one out and say, yes, that's the one that I absolutely want to see, turn into a full-length movie. The ones you've already mentioned, the Ghost Train one was excellent. The Mission one is the one I've probably seen more than any of the others from the Amazing Stories. Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one. That's a tough one to answer. I just remember enjoying those so much, and then going back and looking after. It's been years since I think I've watched any of them except for The Mission. I remember watching that just a couple of years ago. But knowing the kind of the superstar cast of people and the directors that did those episodes, it makes me want to go back and rewatch that whole series.
Yeah. And you talk about an awesome theme, music-wise. That show had a great theme. The more I think about it, The Mission would be really cool if basically they kept the fantasy stuff to exactly what they did in that episode, but they expanded it and maybe just made a story about a bomber squadron during the Second World War. And you could, if you wanted, you could start with these guys, maybe back in basic training and basic flight school, and maybe signing up to, go fight the Nazis and all that kind of thing, and just make it like a straight up legit movie about the Second World War, and then just have the twist in right at the end where he saves himself. You could, if you wanted to do it like Harry Potter style, where you put hints in that maybe this guy is special, and he had some kind of power early on. But I think it would be cool. At first I was like, I don't know how The Mission would expand, but I think honestly, just do that. Just like if you see in the movie Memphis Belle, do Memphis Belle, but in the last 2 minutes, have those wheels stick out. I don't know. I think that could be pretty cool. And if audiences didn't know what was coming, I think that could potentially be a very, very cool, very, very cool movie.
I'm going to go with the one, just because we are recording this on Mark Hamill's birthday, I'm going to go with the episode called Gather Ye Acorns from Amazing Stories, in which a tree troll convinces an 18-year-old to follow his dreams, and that 18-year-old is Mark Hamill.
That would be cool.
There we go. I think one of the things I appreciate about the Amazing Stories is that they were these short stories. And I think, for me personally, as much as I enjoy reading a good novel, I think I've always tended a little bit more towards short stories, because I like when an artist can pack something into a small amount of time. Whether it be a short story, whether it be a poem, whether it be a short film. I think my fascination has always been, I want to see what somebody can do in a very constrained amount of time. I still love movies, but to me, it's more fascinating when I can see, okay, what can they do with 20 minutes? What can they do with 15 minutes? So I don't know. My response to that is, I don't know that I want to see any of them made into feature films, because to me, that's what I enjoyed about those. It was a bite-sized piece of time, but still an amazing story packed into that amount of time.
So you just pulled a me. You just rejected the question.
I did. I rejected the premise of the question. So I pulled a Pat.
Well, fine then. You go pull on Pat, and I'm going to go to bed.
All right, well, good night, everybody. All right. Well, I think that before we get ourselves in any other trouble, I think that's going to do it for Batteries Not Included. I did want to mention, I did see something else interesting. The name of the movie in international releases was not Batteries Not Included. It was Miracle on 8th Street. So then you are hearkening back to some of the, some of the more classic movies like Miracle on 34th Street and some of those others. But saw that just a few minutes ago and thought that was worth mentioning. All right. Well, so this one was Batteries Not Included. And next time around, we are going to be, we may be doing a little bit of shuffling here because with our 150th episode turning into 3 episodes, we are a little bit behind in the movies that we're going to do for September because we are recording this on September 25th, meaning there is only 1 week of September left. And we have this movie and 3 others in our September sci-fi month list of movies. So we might be moving a few around. Here is what we had intended for September and October. So this is all tentative. And like I said, we might move some stuff around a little bit. Coming up next is going to be Inner Space. Great movie. I love that movie. And then Predator, we might move Predator to next month because next month is our horror movies, and I think Predator can fit well in there. We could move Superman 4, The Quest for Peace into horror because it's a scary movie to watch. I don't know. We'll think about that one. Jeff, I know you already said, just for reasons of sanity and mental health, you might skip that one.
Which one?
Superman 4, The Quest for Peace.
Yeah, I don't feel the need to watch it again.
You know what? I don't blame you. You know what I'd do? Get Superman. Then October is our horror month, and we're going to be looking at Prince of Darkness, Hellraiser, Near Dark, and Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors. And I know that that's absolutely the month that Pat has been looking forward to all year.
The last 11 months.
Yeah, there we go. So we will. We might move a few of those around. Next week we will definitely do Inner Space, but we might move a couple of the others around, and then we'll move on into our October horror month. The last thing I wanted to mention before we kind of wrap up and tell you where you can find us in all these other places. If you are looking, because it is coming up on October, and if you are looking for I'm trying to remember who. It's the Seattle Pop Culture Museum. I'm going to forget what it's called. But there's a Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle. I think it's just called Museum of Pop Culture. But they have a must-see horror movie list. So as it gets closer to October, and if you are looking for something to go watch in terms of horror movies, as we go on into this next month, the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle, Washington has a list of the 100, it is the 100 horror movies to see before you die. And I was looking over the list, and I'm like, you know what? If there were 100 days in October, I would challenge myself to try to go through this list in the month of October. But I kind of feel like this could be its own podcast, just to go through this list of it's the EMP Museum is what it used to be called, but I think it's now called the Pop Culture Museum. And just an outstanding list of horror movies. Some of the ones on here are ones that we will either be covering remakes of them, or they are inspired by movies that we are watching here are inspired by ones that are on. There are a couple on here that we have done or that we will do that are on this list, but it starts, the very first one on the list, and it goes chronologically, is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari from 1920. That's a great one if you've never seen that one before. Nosferatu in 22, Dracula in 1931, Frankenstein in 1931, but goes on through a lot of those classic horror movies. That's kind of the beginning of the list. And then you get to Them from 1954, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Godzilla, The Blob. You start to kind of fly into the 60s and 70s, Night of the Living Dead, Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, Carrie, The Omen. You get on into the 80s with The Shining, American Werewolf in London, Poltergeist, The Thing, Nightmare on Elm Street, The Fly, Evil Dead 2, Hellraiser, Silence of the Lambs, Interview with the Vampire. So the list just goes on and on. So if you are a horror film enthusiast, which I know Dennis is a big fan, and I'm a fan of a good horror movie too, especially some of those classic horror movies. I'm even just looking at the list from like the 20s up through the 50s. I'm like, I could do that. Like, I'd be totally happy to spend a month of October just watching some of those old horror movies. I'm good to go with that. So I'll include the link to this in some of our show notes here. But if anybody's looking for anything to watch, this would be a good place to start. Excellent horror film list for the month of October. All right. Well, that being said, where can you find us? You can find us on 30podcast.com. That's 30podcast.com. That's our website. And that'll have all the different places you can get a hold of us. We are on all the different social media outlets. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. You can call us. We have a voicemail line. You can email us. We have a Gmail address that you can email us at 30podcast@gmail.com. We are on Twitter. That's where we do most of our interacting and posting of things. It's at 30podcast on Twitter. And we are creeping up on almost 900 followers. So we're gonna see if we can get to that 1,000 by Halloween. So, but yeah, and you can listen to us on Stitcher, Satchel, Google Play Podcasts, iTunes, pretty much anywhere that they have a collection of podcasts. We are there. So you can go find us in all those different places. You can also listen to our episodes directly from our website at 30podcast.com. So that all being said, thank you for joining us tonight. We look forward to having you back here again next week for Inner Space. If you want to get ahead of the game and go watch the movie now, go watch it now so you'll be ready to go for next week. If you've got any feedback, if you've got any thoughts or memories of watching that movie you want to share with us, feel free to send us a message on any of those ways that you can get a hold of us. And until then, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Pat.
Thanks, John.
And be excellent to each other. Go watch some good movies. We'll see you next time.